The Mr. Beast story is literally, there is a trans person associated with Mr. Beast who has transitioned, and everyone's just angry because they transit. That's it. That's the whole story. The whole story is Mount Walsh and all these other clowns like Michael Knowles getting angry at the dude for transitioning. Oh, I said for the dude transitioning. Oh, I've been exposed as a conservative. For them transitioning. Look at that. See? I'm a conservative in disguise. Exposed once again. Literally, who cares? The thing is, I've always felt like dude was gender neutral. I don't know if anybody else feels that way. I know a lot. Look, I don't use dude because I've heard people tell me dude isn't gender neutral, but I've always used dude in a gender neutral way. Chris is any and all. Aha, look at that. I get away with it again. Now I will never correct my behavior. I think most people see dude as neutral at this point. Okay, even if most people see it that way, I've heard trans people say, like, I don't feel comfortable hearing dude, so it's just best to probably not use. Unless somebody explicitly tells me, oh, that's okay. But if somebody's any and all, you can call them dude, you can call them anything, really. Do you see the insane Michael Knowles thumbnail about this on YouTube? Oh my goodness. You know what? I think we can do the story and then we'll get into the leaks. Then we'll do the Destiny debate. Dude, there's so much banger content in it. So Mr. Beast is in hot water for the dumbest reason imaginable. So Mr. Beast has a friend by the name of Chris who's going through a transition right now. They're going through, you know, living as a man to transitioning and becoming non-binary, going through the transitional process. They're taking HRT. They're very open with this, explaining their experiences, explaining how this is making their life better and how the HRT is helping them, and helps that, like, informed consent HRT can help other people who need this type of treatment. And honestly, when I saw this, I was just like, oh, okay. And then I just kept going. And the main reason why is I do not watch Mr. Beast content, right? I do not need to watch like the vast majority of his content. I think the last Mr. Beast video I watched was IRL Squid Game, which, I mean, I don't even know if I need to watch IRL Squid Game, right? I could just turn on like The Price is Right and I'm watching IRL Squid Game. It's supposed to be commentary on stuff like that anyway. But I just didn't pay much attention to it because I didn't think it was deserving of my attention, because people transition all the time. You know, people like discover this part of themselves, they transition. It was not a circle of friends or people I cared about. But just like the Anheuser-Busch story with Dylan Mulvaney, the fact that a trans people, like that a trans
Burns
person
is
exists,
an immoral, morally
they just
corrupt,
exist
bankrupt man
in the sphere, just exist online, period, is enough to garner anger. Maniac Shade, thank you so much for the prime. I appreciate it. Dylan is based in Hawkpilled. I am not Hawkpilled, but I am based. I appreciate it. So in this instance, the reason people are angry, it depends on who you ask. So there's 3 videos I want to go through today. But before we go through those videos, I want to talk about how Mr. Beast has responded to one of these videos by one of the people called Sunny V2. Sunny V2 is like a documentary YouTuber who does documentaries on like drama and internet history. They did a video. I think we can pull it up. I don't think I have it pulled up already, but it's already right there. You can see it. Why Chris will soon be a nightmare for Mr. Beast. The premise of the video is that Chris is going to be a nightmare for Mr. Beast. Financially, it could hurt their viewership. It could be like a bad for his brand. And Mr. Beast responded to this. We're going to watch the video in a second. YouTube star Mr. Beast is hitting back at fellow content creator Sunny V2 for making a video claiming that his friend Chris Tyson will be a PR nightmare for him and his YouTube empire. Jimmy Mr. Beast Donaldson is the single most followed content creator on YouTube, boasting over 145 million subscribers and successfully beating out the site's previous record holder, PewDiePie, last year. Donaldson is best known for his over-the-top challenge videos, his big-budget reactions to popular media like Squid Game, and his charitable projects. You guys know all about this. Anyway, okay. Anyway, here's the original post of Chris Tyson coming out talking about HRT, Mr. Beast saying got you, sending support. But I want to focus on the message that Mr. Beast put out in reaction to the Sunny V2 video, which is this. Somebody posts the Sunny V2 link and he responds to it saying, yeah, this is getting absurd. Chris isn't my nightmare. He's my effing friend and things are fine. All this transphobia is starting to piss me off. Now, apparently, this was enough to set off a lot of people and anger a lot of people. It got a pretty warm reception online because it's an easy and sympathetic message to understand. This is a person who is MrBeast's friend, who has been with them creating content and probably being a friend behind closed doors for a very long time. They're transitioning now. MrBeast still wants to be their friend. And now everybody in the world is putting their friend under a microscope because they're going through a different medical treatment now and transitioning. And now everybody's talking about this person's personal life. I see people saying, oh, this person is doing a terrible thing to their son, even though, like, we have no clue if they're like abandoning their son. We've heard nothing about them abandoning their son. I'm positive they still love their son, and they've talked about how much they love their son. We have no reason to believe they're going to be abandoning their son. We hear that, oh, this is a terrible thing to do to the wife. At the end of the day, if they're trans, they're trans. And the longer they deny that they're trans, the worse it's going to be for the wife. It's probably better to confront this sooner rather than later. And we have no clue if they're splitting up or not. It's just people guessing that they're splitting up. It's people making a bunch of assumptions about somebody's personal life with very little information. Anyway, that we're going to get into that stuff later with the Michael Knowles show, Matt Walsh. But first, let's start with the Sunny V2 video.
The Chris Tyson.
Anything that really sucks about this, you know, is all these people making content about MrBeast, like Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles. This could get a lot of younger viewers that enjoy MrBeast's content and kind of suck them into these information spaces too. This really sucks. Anyway, let's watch.
The Chris Tyson situation could become a complete disaster for MrBeast's brand. However, it may also provide some unique benefits. So let's begin by going over the drama before explaining exactly how this will impact the MrBeast channel. In mid-2022, fans began to notice that Chris Tyson was changing. In the early days, he represented the quintessential southern gun and truck loving dude. Yet beginning in March 2022, Chris began to display increasingly feminine traits, making tweets such as "I finally got my nails done at a nail tech." Additionally, Chris would highlight that his facial appearance had changed significantly.
Dude, the music makes it sound so like, oh my gosh, terrifying. This is the type of stuff I put in the background and like analyzing like ISIS footage, like when they packed the TNT into this car that they drove into an airport. That's the type of, you know, that's that's the vibe I'm getting off of the music. But it's just like, they got their nails done. Sorry, just really strange vibe.
Since the start of the pandemic, which accompanied another post reading, "Okay, so in 4 different customs I had to prove I was myself because I quote look nothing like my passport pic, so much that I'm considering updating my passport. Do you see any resemblance?" Prompting replies such as "you went from man to boy." Chris responded by stating, "Nah, to be honest, I just really started taking my mental health seriously and eating better." Yet his Twitter photos kept insinuating that Chris was becoming more feminine, with this same kind of look showing up in his MrBeast appearances. For example, on the 6th of January 2023,
Yeah, we get it. They transitioned. We understand. We get it.
Beast Reacts uploaded a video titled "I strapped a GoPro to a fish," in which Chris dressed in a way that prompted comments such as, "Chris has been adopting more and more traits that remind me of my grandmother." Okay, so some people just gonna ignore Chris's nails? Chris had to have lost a bet. The look is getting wild. The response to the video then prompted countless viral TikToks, such as this one with 700,000 likes, stating, "How did Chris go from this to this?" While others even made the claim that Carl had turned him gay. Now, this was pretty ridiculous as Carl isn't even that feminine, and Chris had come out as bisexual years before he and Carl had even met. The true catalyst for Chris Tyson's feminization instead seemed to have come from his marriage. In January 2022, Chris would post a photo with his wife to his Instagram, yet after this, the family photo stopped altogether. Fans also noticed that he'd removed his wedding ring, with the ring's absence correlating perfectly with the very first post in which he'd painted his nails. Chris confirmed the split in a post from March 2023 reading, "For a little over a year now, me and Katie have been separated," with this also confirming that Chris's transformation.
Okay, so this does confirm that they were separated, but the thing is, right, we don't know the relationship between him and her. We know they've separated. We don't know if they're chill. We don't know if they're Gucci, and we still have no reason to believe that he doesn't have a good relationship with his child. And so again, if they're not made for each other, they're not made for each other. There's a reason why we have divorce in the world, right? Should the argument be, oh, he has to suffer through a marriage that isn't working because, you know, that's just how it is. And I know that's not the argument that Sunny V2 is making right now. We're gonna get into that later.
Began as soon as his marriage came to an end. Chris went from lighting campfires and raising a family with his beautiful wife to now trying to be a wife with his man buns and long nails. As the criticism continued to
He's just reading mean comments.
pile, Chris announced that he'd be taking a break from social media. And while there was a possibility that Chris would make efforts to return to his former self, he'd rather do the opposite and double down on his feminine image, showing up to the Kids' Choice Awards looking like this, before making the announcement that he'd been doing HRT for approximately 2 months, which according to a quick Google search is the medical process for changing genders. Chris
According to a quick Google search. Okay.
would expand on this by stating, informed consent HRT saved my and many others' lives. The hurdles GNC people have to jump through to get life-saving gender-affirming healthcare in a first world country is wild to me. Just let people make informed decisions about their own bodies, which received a positive response from both Carl and MrBeast, who wrote, "Got you, I did one more heart than Carl because I'm a better friend." While his co-workers expressed positivity, others weren't so welcoming. There goes a father figure the kid won't ever be able to look up to. Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. Weak man times. Chris responded to this comment by stating, "This is just more dog whistling that somehow trans and GNC folks aren't safe around kids. Tucker begs for me to come back when I leave for like 2 days to film. He is so loved and happy. Kids aren't born with hate, it's taught by people like you, and my child will only know love. I know I'm going to be a great parent, and so is every other person who puts the love of their child before everything. I made this decision because I wanted to show up as my best and happiest self for him. In a way, this was for Tucker." Chris's response received some positivity such as, "I'm convinced you're an amazing father. Tucker is lucky to have you and also lucky to have all of those who surround and support you in his life, as well as I adore that. I'm glad you made that decision. It's so much easier to be a parental figure when you're not struggling with..."
Can I just say, this is the most sympathetic message that this person could have possibly put out. Most sympathetic message you could possibly put out. Look, I'm still with my child. I still love my child. My child still loves me. We still have a very close relationship. They miss me when I don't even have days to film. So the idea that I'm abandoning my child is absolutely wild, right? So I just unbelievably sympathetic message. Unbelievably sympathetic message. But again, what we're going to be seeing as this video goes on and we go into the more, I would even say more just hateful critiques of this person, is that all of that is brushed aside very quickly.
Dysphoria, yet he'd also receive an equal amount of backlash. You ripped apart your family and took a father figure away from your son just so you could paint your nails and act zesty. Pathetic.
Pathetic. So it has nothing to do with mental health. It has nothing to do with what makes them personally happy. So what we would rather have is somebody unhappy in a marriage that they aren't comfortable with, in a relationship and with themselves and in a body that they don't like, in order for them to drag themselves through a relationship with a woman that they might not have feelings for anymore, or they just cannot bring those feelings about anymore due to a transition, or she might not even feel very invested in them anymore because of the transition, because of this change and explaining who they are and how they present themselves outward. Who knows exactly what caused the breakup? Is very personal. But the idea that he ripped apart the family, this person ripped apart the family because they transitioned. If they could not be together because they're not happy together, then they shouldn't be together. The worst thing you can put a child through when it comes to, besides a divorce, is an angry, hateful relationship, right? I have been in households where the father and the mother are not together. And as much as it, was definitely difficult for the father and the mother not to be together in my relationship when I was growing up, the only thing that probably could have been worse is if my mother and my father stayed together, did not like each other, and then started to bicker,
immoral,
and who knows where it could go from there.
As
I start to look at that relationship and say, that's healthy. It's healthy that mom and dad don't love each other. It's healthy that mom and dad fight all the time. It's healthy that dad is depressed and tries to get through his sorrows with drinking, drugs, and who knows what other types of vices to get through the week. This is all healthy. This is all fine. This is how I'm going to treat my relationship. This is how I'm going to treat my wife when I have a wife one day. This is how I'm going to act in front of my children. Guys, thank you so much for the primer. I appreciate it. So again, this is probably the best path for them if going through medical transition is where they're going with their life. If this is who they are, this is probably the best path for them. And it's better than certainly carrying on a charade. Much better. And again, you're saying took away a father figure from your son. I am positive there are other male figures in that person's life who can fulfill the stereotypical football back and forth trying to be a father figure in that person's life. I am sure that Chris can still be a positive influence in that person's life. In fact, if you think that two women can raise a child, then you should not have a problem with Chris and his mom raising the child together, or in a kind of mixed household where, you know, he gets the child half of the week and she gets the child the other half of the week. Any and all pronouns. So unless the argument, we're going to go back to, I don't know, like 2013, 2014, and we're going to start arguing again on whether women, two women or two men can raise a child. This just seems silly to me.
He will get torn apart at school, won't want to have friends around his house, a life full of difference and being alone.
Wow, man, Craig C, man. I love you, Craig C. I love all these assumptions you make about what this child is going to go through now.
Must have missed the point in that tweet. How's this for him when you're depriving him of a father figure?
Again, this is you could easily just apply this to lesbians should not be able to raise children. Lesbians should not be able to adopt. You can have other masculine figures in the household sent that way to them if that's important to that child and that child's upbringing, right? There are other figures in the household. You can have uncles, grandfathers. You can have other people fill that role. There have been many, many lesbian couples and many, many trans people who have risen children that have turned out perfectly fine and perfectly happy and perfectly healthy.
Although Chris wasn't altered by these comments, as he'd once again reiterate his certainty in a new post reading, "It's never too late to start being yourself," which received praise from MrBeast as well as Nolan and Carl. However, these comments also added,
and YouTube, by the way,
extra fuel to the fire. In a few years, look back at this thread and remember they were never your friends. Only yes men cowards. Hope you come out of this safe.
Wow, man. Fantastic. Fantastic. I'm sure M Alpha knows I'm sure this is probably a very close friend who, you know, looked at all the medical reports, was there with the doctor when they were talking about HRT and, you know, going through what this would be for them and the mental health issues that they're possibly dealing with. I'm sure that they have all the access to all that information so they can come to the conclusion about whether this is the correct mental health and medical decision for them. I'm sure this person has all that information and they're not just talking out of their ass.
MrBeast responded to this with a simple opinion-irrelevant ratio, to which the original commenter would state, "I have 30 followers, so go ahead and ratio me. I'll still rest easy knowing that I'm not a coward who idly sits by watching my friend ruin his own life." In some ways, it was nice to see the boys standing up for Chris on Twitter. However, the situation has already begun to change the dynamic within the videos. For example, in a recent livestream titled "Opening 1,000 Mystery Art Boxes," Chris would once again dress in quite a feminine way, and while everybody participated as usual, the energy and vibe didn't feel nearly as smooth as it normally does. It felt as though there was an unaddressed elephant in the room, and therefore everybody was in their head, as opposed to being in the present moment enjoying each other's company. Maybe everybody was simply too busy opening packages, but Chris did make these.
You think? Do you think it was all they were just like, how do we stream with what do I call them? What do I call them? What I don't want to get canceled. I don't want to get. Or do you think, oh, they're opening boxes, and it's very different than trying to think of jokes constantly to tell to the camera when you're preoccupied with opening boxes? It could be all of that with this unknown problem in the room. It could be that they're all terrified of addressing the fact that the person sitting next to them is on HRT, like they have to like announce at the start of the video. Please, everyone, I just want everyone to know they're on HRT. I just need everyone to just a disclaimer at the start of the video. For what reason? I don't know. It's completely unrelated to boxes being open, to 1,000 boxes being open. Or is it the more likely scenario that they're all opening boxes and yeah, the dynamic when you're distracted with doing something is going to be very different. I don't know if you guys have ever tried to like talk and play video games at the same time. I've tried to do it on stream before. I suck at it. I really, really suck at it. Even more so because of my ADHD. And even though I'm not a huge MrBeast fan, I have a weird feeling that there's a lot of people in that room that have ADHD when I see the type of content they make.
These bizarre jokes about Jimmy being female, making him incredibly uncomfortable.
Oh my God, Jimmy, look, they drew you. Jimmy, they drew you so well. It looks just like you. Oh, yes.
Oh my God, it's Jimmy.
How did fan art? This is what we were looking for. Be brave, be honest, be kind, Mr. Beast. That is my tagline.
Becoming even weirder.
Dude, it wasn't that awkward. It wasn't that bad. Why do you need all this ominous music? It wasn't that bad. And they're opening like 1,000 boxes. They got to think of jokes on the fly. Who really cares? Dude, this is so pointless. This whole video is pointless.
When each member started to pay each other compliments.
Hey, nice shirt. Thanks, dude. Nice shirt.
Hey, nice shirt.
Thanks, dude. Nice shirt.
Thanks. Nice shirt.
Nice shoes.
For the most part, the live stream was
Dude, who cares? This is literally nothing.
devoid of awkward moments. However, it would act as fodder for another 100 million views worth of drama and criticism. Chris likely believes that people will slowly adapt to his new appearance over time, but is this really going to happen? Well,
I mean, they probably, if they want to keep watching, yeah, I mean, they kind of have to, right?
maybe. It's difficult to say as the situation is fairly unique, especially when considering Chris's reputation and influence. However, if Chris continues to transition, would it be unreasonable to say that he could jeopardize some of the personality traits which made him a successful member in the first place? Perhaps.
I mean, like, who knows? Maybe. Like, people grow and change over time. The stuff that made me get viewership a lot earlier in my career are just stuff that I don't do anymore because I'm just not interested into it when it comes to like roundtables and stuff like that. So maybe there's like a certain masculine trait that they have that they don't lean into anymore that could have gotten them attention while being in MrBeast videos that could help them out. But if that's the case, that'll be found out in time, right? And that has to do with their personality, right? And just them being who they are. Unless we're saying that somebody should put on a charade on screen in order to like keep viewers attentive. So just like being like kind of just like going out of the way to be more masculine than they actually are in order to like retain viewership.
Perhaps the opposite will happen, and he'll instead pick up new personality traits that better resonate with the current MrBeast audience.
Yeah, exactly.
This was put forward in many comments supportive of Chris, who implied that there'll be millions of queer kids who look up to him, although this doesn't necessarily mean that it'll add any value to the videos. MrBeast has likely cultivated a massive LGBT audience, all of whom are already watching anyway, and if we've learned anything from Hollywood in recent years, it's that adding over-the-top LGBT characters for the sake of relatability rarely works as intended, and is often nothing more than a distraction from the premise of the movie or video.
Well, adding this person onto the show specifically for being trans and to make it so they're appealing to a trans audience would be very silly. But the thing is, this is somebody who was on the show, friends with MrBeast, and was able to garner fans and viewership before they came out as trans, and now they have transitioned. They didn't get the job and position because they are trans. They got the job and position because they did their job well, because they were funny, because they could help bring in viewership, because they worked with Jimmy and were professional with Jimmy and were friends with Jimmy. So I don't feel like there's any evidence brought forward that any of that has changed yet. And the only evidence brought forward that their personality has changed drastically to the point where they could no longer be as funny as they used to be was some clips of them opening boxes and saying, "I like your shirt." Come on.
On top of this, it can be uncomfortable and unrelatable for the silent majority, although as we have seen, a situation.
Also, if I just want to put this out there, right? It felt like a big part of that was like, oh, the LGBTQ plus community is not a fan of pandering. Dude, there's a reason why they put rainbows on everything and sell them, okay? It's not just because, you know, I run the deep state cabal and I make them do that. It's also because a lot of people actually do buy that. A lot of people, if they put a rainbow on something, they will buy it. The people do like displaying parts of their identity. So if you just want to talk about profitability, the reason Anheuser-Busch is working with Dylan Mulvaney, the reason why a lot of these companies are putting like queer iconography on their companies during Pride Month, stuff like that, they're doing it because it's profitable, okay? A lot of them, they may be doing it because their owners and workers might generally care about these issues, but a lot of them are doing it because it's profitable. They wouldn't be doing it otherwise. This is the main reason these companies do this. I know everybody's talking about the conservative boycott on Anheuser-Busch, but that's not really going to amount to anything. And it hasn't. If you look at the stock price, it's basically the same.
uncomfortable and unrelatable for the silent majority, although as we have seen, a situation like Chris's does have the potential to create an otherworldly amount of discussion, which could be seen as a benefit for the MrBeast brand.
Drama is good for growth, 100%. That would be an easy way to up my
So
views
you're
if
a
I got it.
Keemstar
Bro.
The problem is this type of situation is probably the last thing that MrBeast wants to attract, as he's forced to agree with Chris's position, as he has no way of manipulating the situation without being painted as the bad guy. It's
Okay, so on one hand, he's talking about how the drama and negative attention and all the attention from this could be positive for the brand. Then you play a clip of MrBeast saying drama's 100% good for the brand. Yes, this is good. But then his follow-up is, but Jimmy can't do anything. If he disagrees, that's the negative. But what if Jimmy agrees with his friend? What if Jimmy's like, yeah, it's totally fine you're transitioning. I support you. This seems like a personal decision. That's your business. Not really much of my business. Yeah, and you have a job here as long as you continue to do your job well, continue to entertain people, and continue to, you know, help provide for the channel. Like, why can't that be his position? I mean, the majority of people Jimmy's age probably believe something similar to that. It wouldn't be that hard to believe Jimmy just thinks that. We would need to see some evidence that Jimmy thought differently up until now. That up until now, Jimmy was actually, no, I'm actually incredibly transphobic. I think people transitioning is terrible. I'm actually a Matt Walsh stan. I am a big subscriber to the Daily Wire. Unless we say like, oh yes, JK Rowling, I support JK. And until we see something like that, we have no reason to believe he doesn't, you know, just support his trans friend.
a lose-lose situation for MrBeast. I think Jimmy is in an inescapable situation. If he kicks out Chris, cancelled. If he don't, his channel will die for real.
Dude, I'm sorry, okay? The idea that, okay, can we go look at MrBeast's channel? Can we go look at it right now? MrBeast. The last video, released 2 weeks ago, 116 million views. Video before that, 101 million. Video before that, 133 million. Okay? These last two videos happened during this period with Chris, during this transition period with Chris. It is doing the same as the videos before this transition period with Chris. Same viewership number, same everything. This doesn't seem to be having any effect so far on main channel viewership. I don't know much about the secondary channels like MrBeast Gaming or anything like that, but we have no reason to believe that it has had a negative effect on channel growth or negative effect on the channel. So the idea that if he does not disassociate with a trans person that has helped make the channel what it is today, that the channel will fail, not only is jumping the gun on the type of content Chris can still make after transitioning, they're just assuming that all the content's going to be garbage because they're a woman now, but also just is not garnered out in the data, at least from what's publicly available so far.
An inescapable situation is a pretty good way of describing the drama, which is also why it deserves the harsh label of being a nightmare. Jimmy has no option but to publicly express acceptance of Chris's transition, aside.
It's not a nightmare if he just simply supports his friend. It isn't a nightmare. It isn't a nightmare if he simply supports his friend and it's not negatively impacting his career. And even if it is negatively impacting his career, some people can still have principle and be like, no, I will not kick off my friend from my show just because they're trans. Let's say that I had a friend on my show who, I don't know, was from a minority group that isn't well liked. Let's say Romani, right? And I found out that there was like 5% of my viewers from, I don't know, Serbia and I know parts of Ukraine or wherever. In Europe, I'm going to tell you honestly, there's a lot of anti-Romani bigotry. I've ran into a lot of it in Poland. I've ran into a lot of it in Ukraine. It exists. If me taking that stance that I'm still going to be with my Romani friend, I'm still going to stream with my Romani friend, lost me 5% of my viewership, I take the 5% hit because that's the principled position to do. Honestly, it would probably be worse for MrBeast, and this would be the nightmare, if we found out that simply to appeal to an audience that he might not even agree with, to this conservative audience who just doesn't want him to associate with trans people, that he will actively stab his friends in the back for being honest about who they are. That would be the smart thing to do, or that would be even really an option here, is weird to me. It would be a nightmare if he did something like that. It would be a nightmare not only because he would rightfully probably be quote unquote canceled for something like that, but also it would be morally repugnant.
Silence or even worse, disapproval would come with obvious severe repercussions. However, in accepting Chris,
the thing is, if he was to backstab his friend and say you can no longer be on my show because you've transitioned, even though there's no evidence that this has negatively impacted the type of content they can make, then yeah, that would be terrible, and it would be right for people to have a negative response to this. But we have no reason to believe that's even MrBeast's opinion. He's given no indication online, on video, on Twitter, on any social media, on Instagram, on TikTok. He's given no indication that that's his position at all. So we have no reason to believe it's a nightmare for MrBeast, because he seems to align with Chris and his friend, which isn't that surprising because it's his friend.
Transition, Jimmy implies that this will be the new normal within the content, thus annoying a different group of people, many of whom will never express their true feelings and may rather simply click on fewer MrBeast videos.
It is a one person 10-minute ago comment, 0 likes, 0 replies. Okay.
If this is the case, Jimmy has no option but to accept this fate.
Ria Cooper, thank you so much for the primer.
As removing Chris from the videos in any kind of way could create an even more severe media firestorm. The only clean solution, should things go south, might be for Chris to resign.
Yeah, people talking about, also, somebody just brought this up in chat. It was SoakMill69. Just brought this up in Gutter chat. How are we going to call this over the top when it seems like they kind of like slowly let it creep up, slowly like started adding like makeup, slowly started doing their nails, slowly, you know, started taking this HRT and having these physical changes. Like, this doesn't feel like it was like, hey, everybody, I'm trans, like shoving it into every video. It feels like it was a slow transitionary period. I mean, the video went to great length at the start to describe the slow transitionary period going from the Chris that we did know into this Chris that is now a woman, right? That went into great detail. Great detail, not a woman, I mean, but non-binary. See, look, I'm being brainwashed by Matt Walsh right now, brain gun. We went into great detail about this transitionary period and how it happened over this month, all these small details that people put together. So it seems like you had to put together a puzzle to figure out what was going on. It doesn't seem like it was that loud, that you know, braggadocious of an entrance of being trans.
Himself, and even then rumors and bad press will be unavoidable. Whether it be arrogance or ignorance, Chris seems oblivious to how this whole thing might impact Jimmy, forgetting that he achieved his current level of success.
Dude, okay, that's so bad.
By avoiding this exact type of drama.
By avoiding this, he garnered this success by not being trans, is what that translated to. He avoided these types of dramas. He was not honest about himself in public, and he gained his success. Number one, we don't know whether or not Chris would have gotten the success if he had come out earlier or later. We'd have no clue. This is like ipso facto, just like throwing out like random ideas that we have no way to back that up. We have no reason to believe that they couldn't have been as funny or have garnered as much of an audience or attention to themselves while also being trans. We have no reason to believe otherwise, right? I have no reason, at least, to believe otherwise. I don't know why they would believe so. Also, the idea that, what was, I'm sorry, can we just hear that again?
Himself, and even then rumors and bad press will be unavoidable. Whether it be arrogance or ignorance, Chris seems oblivious to how this whole thing might impact Jimmy, forgetting that he achieved his current level of success by avoiding this exact type of drama.
Oblivious or arrogance. So to be clear, when making the decision, making a medical decision about what they wanted to do going forward in their life and transitioning, they first needed to consult Jimmy's bottom line before making a medical decision about what would be best for their own mental health, what would be best for their marriage, what would be best for their life and who they are. They had to consult Jimmy's bottom line and if it would cause a stir online first, as he served the serfdom of the MrBeast empire. That was what was most important. Not to mention, it says oblivious and arrogant to the fact MrBeast is an open support and seems to be in private support as well, and we have no reason to believe otherwise. And so, like, you can say oblivious to the fact, but he's openly out here supporting him. We've openly out here supporting him. I don't understand what the problem is. I don't understand how we could interpret this as always being oblivious to the fact. I am sure that he had backroom conversations with MrBeast as this was going on. As we can see, MrBeast was in the loop. So he was informing MrBeast. MrBeast could have told him this, and this. If Mr. Beast had these concerns in private and they're friends, there's a pretty good chance that Chris would have respected whatever Mr. Beast had to say to him. But didn't say anything outside of, I support you. So this is like a lot of assumptions on his part about arrogance and oblivious. If Chris went to Mr. Beast and said, hey, I'm going to transition, yada, 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 and Mr. Beast said, that's cool, I support you, what else is Chris supposed to do? Well, Jimmy, even though you support me, I'm not going to transition, because I heard from Zunny V2 that there's certain people in your audience who might be transphobic and may leave. Therefore, I'm going to keep my body the way it is, or I'm going to quit even though you don't want me to, because it could possibly have a negative effect on your bottom line, which has not been shown yet. At DylanBurnsTV, I disagree with you on this topic from Bad Robotnik. Do you want to come on stream and talk about it? Because I feel like this is super open and shut. This is unbelievably open and shut. This is unbelievable. Let me see your comments. If they're not stupid enough, let's see. DylanBurn, let's be honest. 26-year-old men wearing women's clothing is weird in front of millions of viewers and also kids. Who cares? Who cares? Like, what when we say weird, what do you mean by weird? As in, oh, this is not the societal norm? It's not gonna hurt the kids if the dude's wearing a dress. Dude, gender neutral dude. I love it. I use it that way. Nobody, who's gonna care? Well, who's it negatively impacting? If I put a flower in my hair right now, would I be hurting any children that could possibly watching my program? By the way, this is not a program for children. I mean, weird. Who cares if it's weird? Weird. You know what's weird? Let's go to MrBeast's channel. You know what's weird? Let's see what MrBeast puts out. Because we don't want MrBeast videos to be weird. We don't want MrBeast videos to be weird. I paid a real assassin to try and kill me. I survived 50 hours Antarctica. Last to take handoff jet keeps it. Hydraulic press versus Lamborghini. Survive 100 days in a circle, win $500,000. This one just says, I hunted 100 people. What does that even mean? I think I watched part of this. Either way, this channel's already weird. It's already a weird channel. This is a weird channel. I don't think having one more person on the channel, having a person on the channel be trans, one more person on the channel wearing feminine clothing is going to have that much of a negative effect. No, I don't think it's going to have a negative effect on children at all. I think you're just trying to find something to be angry at. What's weird about MrBeast is he's not a Dylan Burns chatter. Good gutter check comment. I bet MrBeast will make a video destroying Sunny 2 video. I doubt it. I doubt he wants to give it even that much air. I think he responded to it on Twitter, as we just read earlier. We read earlier that he responded to it on Twitter, and his response to it was, yeah, this is getting absurd. Chris is my nightmare. He's my fucking friend, and things are fine. All this transphobia is starting to piss me off. Anyway, that's enough of that. Let's move on. Let's move on to Michael Knowles with the title MrBeast's sidekick goes trans. I don't have the thumbnail for the second video Michael Knowles uploaded about MrBeast's friend's transition. But this title is, maybe this is why MrBeast's friend went trans. Let me bring up the thumbnail. I think I put it. I think I put it in the. Yeah, here it is. Here it is. Look at this. Dude, look at this. What is going on? What is going on, man? What is happening? They gotta leave this person alone, man. Dude, Dylan Mulvaney of the Anheuser-Busch Corporation, right? Doing that one, promo. And again, Dylan Mulvaney got torn to shreds for doing a beer promo for Bud Light. Bud Light got torn to shreds on Twitter. I mean, not in the stock market because nobody cares, right? But got torn to shreds on Twitter for just existing near the company while trans, right? But this is another level. This is another level. Okay, let's check it out. Let's check it out.
not just affecting kids and teenagers. MrBeast is probably the biggest YouTube channel. His videos get tens of millions, hundreds of millions of views. MrBeast's sidekick is a guy named Chris Tyson. Sorry, was a guy named Chris Tyson. I don't say that because he's dead. I say that because he says he's no longer a guy. Chris Tyson is 26 years old, and he has just decided that he is secretly a woman. Chris Tyson has made all sorts of jokes about transvestites and transgenderism, and he's mocked the idea of it before. Now, he says, I am transgender. I am.
Okay, people say that, and I've heard people say this multiple times in relation to Chris. I don't know how that's evidence against them being trans, because the idea of like the repressed homosexual being like, haha, man, it'd be crazy if like I sucked a cock right now. Huh? Wouldn't that be funny if I like if I was gay? If F slur, I'm not an F slur, haha. Like the idea of the repressed homosexual, there's a reason why that's a stereotype, right? And I have no reason that doesn't also probably apply to trans people as well.
Am a woman. All fun and games, right? We kind of giggle at it. I pity everyone who falls into this confusion.
Yeah. Dude, the thing that I hate about Michael Knowles the most is he's just so condescending, man. Like his politics are terrible, obviously. This is the same guy who was like, we need to eradicate transgenderism from the public sphere. It's like he was about to like transition into speaking German. I mean, you saw the mustache forming live on stage. But he's just a condescending cunt. It's just the way he talks towards people. Like, oh, I sympathize for this fucking fool so much. It's just so condescending. It's so bad.
But this is even worse because Chris Tyson is married and has a 2.5-year-old child. And he just woke up one day, told his wife, didn't tell his kid, I assume, because the kid's probably just starting to talk, but told his wife, yeah, I'm not going to be your husband anymore because I'm going to be your wife or something. I'm a woman now. Sorry, Sonny, I'm not daddy anymore. I'm mommy now, or I'm something else, but I'm not daddy, whatever that is. And he's catching a lot of flack for this online.
Okay, you said it's worse. So to be clear, Michael Knowles would rather have an unhappy marriage where the father in the scenario is denying who they are, is unhappy, and in an unhappy marriage, presenting an unhappy marriage to their child, trying to present that as a healthy marriage, so that child then goes off and gets into his own unhealthy marriage years from now, thinking that that's okay, thinking that arguing in front of the child's okay, thinking of not being romantically involved with your wife or showing affection is okay. Like all this is fine. Just go through the charade and actively suffer in honor of keeping together this matrimony. For what? The good of the child? Will it be for the good of the child? As much as I think I was affected by my mother and my father never being together and, you know, them splitting due to my mother's like drug addiction, which is, of course, is a very different scenario. Due to my mother's drug addiction and my father's just, I don't know, criminal activity and the way he carried himself, right? It would probably have been worse for me to grow up in that household because it would not have been a productive, good household for me to be in with the problems she was facing and the problems he was facing that made neither of them good for each other. Obviously, this is a very different scenario, but not every time, not every scenario would it be best for the kid to have the mother and the father together romantically. Definitely, if the mother and the father can still be involved in that child's life, caring for that child, even if they're not together, which from everything we know publicly right now seems to be the case, as he still actively sees the child. Still actively sees the child, still active in the child's life. We have no reason to believe that that parental figure is gone.
Now, in response to that, Chris Tyson has said, informed consent, hormone replacement.
Michael Knowles already fumbling. Informed consent. Consent.
Therapy saved my and many others' lives. The hurdle gender nonconforming people have to jump through to get life-saving, gender-affirming healthcare in a first world country is wild to me. Just let people make informed decisions about their own bodies. in a first world country, as if they have these kinds of therapies in non-first world countries. They don't have a lot of these in Zambia, okay? I don't think there's a lot of hormone replacement therapy going on in Namibia, okay? But he says this is absolutely shocking. This is life-saving treatment.
He says this is absolutely shocking. As if he hasn't complained about trans people on his show every day. Shocking that somebody would say that HRT helped them. Shocking, shocking news.
This is the line they always use. And this is the line that the teachers and the doctors use to guilt parents.
The doctors, the nefarious doctors.
And
the nefarious informed doctors who know more than Michael Knowles.
Initiate them into the transgender cult.
Initiate them into the cult.
They'll say, well, would you rather have a dead son or a living daughter? Yeah, you got to trans your kid, you got to trans your son and chop off his genitals and put him onto all these hormones that make him look a little bit more like a girl.
See, this is the problem with Michael Knowles. He's such a cunt. I don't even think he realizes that he's such a cunt, because all Chris said was, hey, HRT helped my life and it has saved people's lives, which is undeniably true. There's already data out there showing how it can help people when it comes to the mental health issues. There is a lot of people coming out and who have shown their personal testimony of how HRT has helped them on a personal level. And he has turned somebody who specifically said in their original tweet, and he didn't even notice it. He read the word wrong. He didn't even read the tweet correctly. He doesn't even know what Chris was saying. He says, informed consent, informed as in knowing what you're getting into. And Michael Knowles twists this statement about informed consent, knowing what you're getting into and how that can help you, twists it into, oh, Chris is using a talking point that is about chopping off children's penises without their knowledge and scaring their parents into it, when that is not at all what Chris was saying. This is just unbelievably bad faith. This is like a 13-minute video. We're not watching all of it because there's so much to look at here. Let's just move on to the next video Michael Knowles made about the issue, where decides to revisit it a few days later after seeing the first video, I think, do well, so wanted to talk about it more. Let's see what Michael Knowles had to say about Lolly and Chris.
There's this guy, Chris, on MrBeast's YouTube channel. MrBeast, biggest YouTube channel.
Oh, speeded up. Let's bring it back to normal.
And this guy, Chris, is married with a kid, and Chris has just decided that he's a woman now, which I imagine was not a pleasant thing for his wife to hear, a very cruel thing to do to his son, puts MrBeast in a terrible position.
Cruel thing to do to his son. He has no clue about his personal relationship with his son. Should I just make assumptions about Michael Knowles' family? Because it's a cruel thing that Michael Knowles goes home to his wife and puts her through his presence every night. That's a cruel thing that he does, but I don't comment on it because it's not my place.
Because MrBeast tries to remain apolitical, but now his sidekick is taking on the most controversial issue in all of politics right now. And what is MrBeast going to do? As of now, MrBeast is defending his friend and employee, and he's attacking the transphobes. That is probably not a good winning path in the long run, because there are a lot of transphobes. If by transphobes we mean people who just rationally understand that men and women are different and men can't become women.
The vast majority of Americans, I think the last data I saw, 64% of Americans believe that trans people are naturally occurring.
Is occurred.
Blue Rider of Neptune gave Dark Death 999 a tier 1 subscription. I had a grandfather who may have been trans. I don't know because the person had long drank themselves to death. All I know about them is stories from my mom. I mean, the thing is, trans people are naturally occurring in the world. They have been documented from different eons, different ages of history for quite a long time. There's old stories about GIs coming back from World War II and going through transitions, and how it was covered back then in a lot of ways, and how it honestly was less hateful than how it was covered today. Obviously, we made a lot of progress since then, but a lot of the rhetoric now is a lot more hyperbolic than what it was back then. I mean, the Germans were, during the lead up to World War II, specifically, if you want to talk about the type of really hateful ideology back then, specifically went after the trans people first and burned all of the medical terminology, all of the medical research on trans people during all the Nazi book burnings that they were participating in. That's the type of behavior that was going on during that age. And after that was defeated, there was a few smaller stories that you could point out. You can go back then, but you don't even need to go back then. You can go back further. You can go back to further eons before that of different stories like this, all around the world, not only in the United States, not only in the Western world, but all around the world. Now, the thing that gets me about the statement, let me hear it one more time.
The transphobes, that is not.
Oh yeah, 64% of Americans believe that being transgender, these issues with gender that people face are naturally occurring. 64%. His position, Michael Knowles' position, is in the minority. There's a reason why there was such a disgusted reaction to what Michael Knowles said at CPAC, where even like half the CPAC audience wasn't clapping what he was saying when he was talking about they needed to go and eradicate the trans ideology in the public sphere. They needed to eradicate transgenderism from the public sphere. It's his exact words, right? Again, he almost like started speaking German mid-sentence, right? The vast majority of people reacted to that disgusted because the vast majority of people don't agree with this position. And the reason why Michael Knowles has made 2 videos on Chris transitioning on MrBeast's channel is because he knows that having high-profile people transition and do it openly and do it in front of an audience talking about how it was helpful for them could show positive representation for the trans community. And this could be in front of a generally young audience. And he's terrified of there being positive representation of trans people. It reminds me a lot of like the Russian government's justification for the gay propaganda laws, that they need to crack down on any positive representation of gay people. And so they literally just banned any positive representation of gay people. The people who designed those laws have the same concerns that Michael Knowles has, which if they leave it unregulated and don't stop people, then people might, go out and meet trans people, interact with trans people, find them being just like productive members of society, and it could make them not hateful towards them. And so Michael Knowles is terrified of that and cannot let that happen. Also, even the majority of Republicans, I think this was done by, I think somebody in chat will remember because we covered it on the channel before. There was polling done showing that the majority of independents, majority of Democrats, the majority of Republicans believe that the attacks on trans people, LGBTQ plus people, is for political gamesmanship. It's gone too far. There's too much concentration on it. It's for political gamesmanship. Even Republicans and independents are acknowledging more and more and more that the amount of anti-trans, anti-LGBT bills, which I think there's over 400 of those introduced in the 2022 legislative session, is for political gamesmanship, not about actually improving the lives of the people in these states. Because we're talking about these like sports bans, and we're talking about the banning of gender affirming care. We're talking about a very small percentage of the community that's being targeted here and is making up a very large percentage of the political dialogue. And so it isn't that difficult for Americans to see that and be like, this is getting out of proportion. It feels like Republicans don't really have an agenda. And so they're just like filling up the holes in their healthcare plan. They're filling up the holes of their plans and how to, deal with like labor relations and unions with just transphobia and culture war.
Probably not a good winning path in the long run, because there are a lot of transphobes. If by transphobes we mean people who just rationally understand that men and women are different and men can't become women. If you start attacking the transphobes, I don't think that's going to be great for your 100+ million view videos. But back to Chris. I mentioned on the show, I don't really care about this guy Chris's opinions on transgenderism or sex or the composite of body and soul or anything like that. I don't even really care that much about MrBeast's opinions on YouTube. But I asked the question, how does a guy wake up at the age of 26 with a wife and a child and decide that he's a woman? And I suggested that the aspect of this whole transgender phenomenon that people are not really talking about is porn, that porn is driving a lot of this. And I
doesn't provide any data for it, doesn't provide any evidence for it, just wild speculation from a non-medical professional with no background in psychological research whatsoever, but is a conservative commentator on the internet, so speaks with authority, speaks with confidence, no matter how unsourced the claim he's making is.
I even had that thought because I was speaking to a reporter who had done a little bit of a deep dive onto all the kind of weird porn. I'm not saying this reporter was sort of prowling late at night on the secret browser tab or anything like that, but she had gone down this rabbit hole of a specific type of.
It wasn't him, guys. It wasn't him. It wasn't him researching the porn. It was his reporter friend. It was his reporter friend.
Porn that men who have rapid onset gender confusion attribute their confusion to this. I started watching this porn, which is kind of a hypnosis, and then what do you know? I can't get it out of my head, and it's melted my brain, and now I think that I'm a woman.
So they see trans people in porn, jerk off to said porn, and then after seeing it on all that corn, that makes them want to be a woman. Okay, so is there anything to back this up? This is a wild theory that somebody can yank their chicken all the way till being a woman, that they could yank their chicken so much that they want to literally yank off their chicken. It's a wild claim. It's a wild claim. He doesn't provide really any evidence for it. He says that he talked to a reporter friend about it. Doesn't provide any articles, doesn't provide any sources, doesn't provide any data for this wild claim. While also constantly talking about the high demands for data he needs from the trans community to justify HRT, to justify puberty blockers. Constantly talks about, oh, the studies need to have this large of a sample size. It needs to be like this conditions, or this specific conditions. We need 20, 30 years in the future so we can see what the effect is on the mental health conditions of somebody 30 years later for puberty blockers. Talks about that all the time. But when it's time for him to provide evidence, unsourced, random, anonymous reporter, back rooms, don't need to give any details. Fantastic.
So Ali Stuckey, our great friend Ali Stuckey, dug up an old tweet from this guy Chris on the MrBeast show. And
literally, the sissy hypno stuff got to his head.
She said, in a tweet that he just deleted, Chris from MrBeast, who recently announced he's transitioning to a woman, says he likes loli, which is L-O-L-I, which is a form of anime porn in which the female characters are depicted as children or even babies. Man, many, many such cases among trans men.
Okay, so I don't hear about the baby stuff. I don't think that's ever really how it's talked about. But loli, as far as I know, is anime, usually, not always, but usually sexual content that involves very young looking girls. I don't think it necessarily has to be a child, because it's one of those things where it's like, oh, like sometimes it's one of those things where it's like, oh, you know, this is actually an 18,000-year-old witch and they look like they're 7. And it's like, nah, that's not 18,000. If it was 18,000-year-old witch, she'd be wrinkly. There's no wrinkles. No, that makes me feel uncomfortable. And like, so that's the type of content we're talking about, right? So this is a tweet from back when Chris was, I don't know, this was like 8 years ago. Chris was making a lot of really edgy content, a lot of edgy jokes back then. I have no reason to believe this is anything more than that. I mean, it's possible that they were being legitimate when they said this. I'd like to think that wasn't the case. Who knows? But I think the best assumption here is that it was a joke. Is it a funny joke? No. Is it a good joke? No, not really. I don't find it funny, but listen to the conclusion. Matt Walsh doesn't sound like a joke. It might not be a joke, but I have no reason to just like be like, this is enough for me to think that they're genuinely interested in it. So like, we don't know. And you know what, Michael Walsh, you know what he doesn't do? He doesn't reach out to Chris to ask about it. You know, he talks about his anonymous reporter friend. Does he go do some reporting? No, he doesn't do any reporting. Is it a reach to assume it's a joke? I don't know if I can assume it's a joke. I don't know if it's a joke. I don't know if it isn't a joke. But you know, Michael Knowles doesn't do the follow-up of asking if it's a joke, going and asking him, sending him an email, doing anything to, you know, ask them about this old tweet, you know, do some reporting for the Daily Wire, the news site that he works for. Instead, he jumps to this conclusion. Listen to this.
I don't know what this guy Chris meant by that comment, where he had made this whole comment about how much he lusted after this genre of pornography. I'm not saying it means that he's a pedo. I'm not saying it wasn't even just a joke on Twitter. But what is undeniable from this is that this guy Chris knows a lot about porn. If you're familiar enough with porn to make a joke about this obscure sub genre of pornography, then you know a lot about porn, which would seem to back up my thesis, which I said on the show is just a hunch. I don't know this guy, Chris. I haven't read any.
Again, just like wildly speculating. Just wildly speculating. Okay, so first off, Lolly is obscure. Maybe if you're like 37 and you're not online all the time, but if you're online all the time, everyone kind of knows. If you're super, super online and young and in the meme shitposting culture, you know what it is, right? Either somebody's made a meme about somebody's house being raided by the FBI. Possibly you've seen it yourself. I don't know why you would want to, but you've seen it yourself maybe. Maybe you've seen one of the Twitter arguments back and forth as people tried to defend Lolly and watching Lolly online. I saw some of those tweets actually being shared around recently in the debatosphere. I don't engage with that. I'm not really interested in that. But the idea that the only way you could know what Lolly is if you know a lot about obscure pornography is silly. You could have stumbled upon that information in a million different ways. By the way, this person was 19 when this post was made, right? Edgy 19-year-old shit poster. Not that difficult to paint this picture. This was the same person who was making helicopter jokes at the same time. My gender is helicopter, right? Again, repressed homosexual vibes is what I get from that, or repressed trans vibes is what I get from that, looking back upon it now. But the idea that only the people super interested in porn know what Lolly is, I don't know. I think this is just a boomer take. I think this is just a take that's disconnected from, I guess, like young shitposter culture, which generally knows what this is. I'm not saying everybody does. And probably a lot of my viewers don't know what this is. If you're, again, older, but Chris isn't older. Chris is younger. Was 19 when made that post. That would be about the age where most people would know what that is. And that doesn't really prove he knows anything about like a lot of obscure porn. It could, and even if not a lot of people know what it is, you could have stumbled upon this information. Even Michael Knowles is saying this is all just a hunch. He's just openly speculating about whether or not pornography pushed Chris to transition off of a single tweet from when he was 19, 8 years ago, 8 years before he transitioned. What are we supposed to take from that? What are we supposed to take from that? That 7 years ago, in that time period, he's just been like super like deep diving on the pornography. All of this is based upon a single tweet. Also based upon a theory that has no scientific or backing to it, no research backing to it. This is insane. And he's saying that, and like he's saying this to how many people? Over 100,000 people. Over 100,000 people. 8.4 thousand people thought this was a good point. Well, honestly, I think this is enough of the Daily Wire. I was gonna do Matt Walsh next, but dude, like I don't want to do three Daily Wire people in a row. I think that's enough, man. They need to learn to just leave trans people alone. If they wanted to, they could just wait until trans people are acting really psychotic on the internet and just cover that, right? That'd be the easiest thing for them to do. But instead, it's any time that a trans person gets a high profile deal to be in the public eye, they get angry about it. They got angry about Dylan Mulvaney doing a deal with Anheuser-Busch, doing a deal with Bud Light. They got angry about this person transitioning in MrBeast's inner circle, right? It's just, if you're trans, stop being in public. That's what I'm getting from this. If you're trans, stop being in public because you could maybe inform other people that they might be trans. Stop. That's what I'm getting from this. They're terrified.